I have never said this to anyone the way I am about to say it right now. Not in a meeting, not in an interview, not in one of those carefully planned public moments where every word is analyzed and every pause is studied and every facial expression turns into a headline before I have even finished the sentence. I have carried this inside me for a very long time. I hid it under product launches and impossible deadlines and the kind of constant forward motion that makes it easy to avoid the things that truly matter. But I cannot keep it buried anymore because she deserves to hear it clearly, and because I deserve to finally speak it out loud. My love, you are mine only, mine now and always. And before you misunderstand that, before you grab the simplest meaning, let me explain what I truly mean. Because when I say mine, it is not about ownership, it is not about control, it is not about claiming something that does not belong to me. When I say mine, I mean I have chosen you deliberately, fully aware, with complete understanding of who I am and what loving me actually costs a person. I have chosen you anyway. That is what mine means. That is what it has always meant. I just did not know how to say it without hiding behind armor until now. The world has a very fixed picture of who I am. I know exactly what that picture looks like. I have watched it form in real time across years of headlines and profiles and public stories that take on a life of their own, whether they are fully true or not. People see the rockets. They see SpaceX. They see the electric cars and Tesla. They see ambition that looks endless and drive that never seems to shut off. And they believe they understand the whole story. But a picture that only shows the edges never reveals what sits at the center. And what has always been at the center of everything I have built, underneath the missions and the technology and the dream of a future that many think is impossible, is something very simple: the need to be loved, not admired, not respected, not feared or followed or praised. Loved by one person completely in a very specific way that asks nothing of me except that I exist and that I am allowed to be close to them. That is the part people do not see. That is the part that has guided more of my decisions than any business strategy ever did. I grew up in Pretoria, South Africa, and I want to tell you something about that childhood that rarely appears in the stories told about me. Not the bullying. People already know about that. Not growing up without always feeling safe. That has been mentioned too. Not even the difficult relationship with my father. That has been discussed enough. What I want to explain is what those early years did to the part of me that would later spend decades trying to love people and trying to be loved back. When you grow up in a house that does not feel secure, when the place meant to protect you becomes the place you simply survive, you learn something very clear about love. You learn that it is conditional. You learn that it can disappear without warning. You learn that the safest thing you can do is to become so impressive, so capable, so undeniably successful that people cannot afford to walk away from you. You become excellent at everything because excellence feels like protection. It feels like armor. It feels like insurance against abandonment. What you do not learn, what no one teaches you in that kind of environment, is how to simply sit with someone, how to share space without performing, how to be seen without earning approval, how to exist without proving your worth every minute. That lesson took me decades to even begin understanding. I am still trying to understand it now. I pursued Justine Musk the way I pursue everything, directly and intensely, without subtle signals and without a backup plan. She said no at first, and I showed up again, not because I ignored her answer, but because something inside me recognized something inside her. That recognition did not know how to stay quiet. She was brilliant. She had fire. I told her that. I told her I saw myself in her. At the time, that was the most honest sentence I knew how to speak. We were young. At 22, we got married. We built a life. We had 6 children, and we lost one. I want to pause there because Nevada deserves more than a quick mention. He was 10 weeks old. He was our first son. And when he was gone, when that deep and terrible silence entered our home, the kind of silence no parent is ever ready for, I did not know how to hold that grief the way Justine needed me to hold it. She needed to remain inside the pain longer. She needed to sit with it and feel it completely. I moved through it faster, not because I did not feel it, but because staying inside pain without being able to fix it was something I had never learned how to do. I kept moving because moving was the only survival skill I had ever practiced. That difference between what she needed and what I was able to give became one of the first real fractures in something that later broke apart entirely. Years later, she wrote publicly about our marriage. What she wrote was honest, and I respect that honesty, even when it was painful for me to read. She described feeling like an asset instead of a partner. She described a moment at our wedding reception when I said I was the alpha in the relationship. I have thought about that moment many times. I do not deny it happened. What I understand now, and did not understand then, is what that statement carried underneath. It suggested that I saw love as something with a structure I needed to control. It suggested that devotion and dominance felt similar to me, that protecting someone and possessing them existed in the same emotional space. That is not love. That is fear, wearing the mask of love. Fear that if you do not take control, you will lose what matters most. Fear that vulnerability without armor equals vulnerability without safety. I was afraid. I simply expressed fear as authority because authority was the language I spoke best. She also wrote that I told her she had fire in her soul. She wrote that when I said, "I see myself in you," she understood exactly what I meant. And that recognition was real. Whatever became complicated later, that part was true. I've always been drawn to people who burn with their own light instead of reflecting mine. Tallulah Riley had her own light. Grimes had a light that existed on an entirely different frequency from anything I had experienced before. And the mistake I kept repeating was this: I loved the fire, and then I made choices that slowly dimmed it. Not intentionally, but intention does not remove impact. When you pull someone deeply into your orbit, the strength of that orbit can make it hard for them to move freely. I never wanted to dim anyone, but wanting something and actually doing it are not the same. The distance between my intentions and the effect of my actions has been one of the most difficult lessons of my adult life. I want to speak about Tallulah with honesty. We met in 2008. I moved quickly because I always move quickly, and what I felt was immediate and certain in the way early emotions often feel certain before reality tests them. She has said publicly that I was the love of her life. She said that after 2 marriages and 2 divorces. And what that tells me is that love does not need a perfect ending to have been real. You can love someone deeply. You can choose them twice. You can mean every promise at the moment you speak it and still fail to build something that lasts. The love itself was not the failure. The love was never the problem. The challenge was the ordinary structure of a shared life. The quiet Tuesday evenings. The simple dinners when nothing dramatic is happening. The space after the excitement fades, and what remains are 2 people who must choose each other again without the electricity that once made choosing effortless. I was not good at that kind of steady choosing. I am still learning how to improve. There was a line from William Shakespeare that I once shared publicly, and I did not share it casually. Then love devouring death do what he dare. It is enough. I may but call her mine. Many people likely scrolled past it as an interesting quote from an unexpected source. But I meant every word, the boldness in it, the defiance, the belief that love is worth fighting for, even against time, even against loss, even against your own limits. It is enough to call her mine. It is enough to have chosen. That feeling has lived inside me long before I had the courage to explain it clearly. The desire to find one person and choose them not as property, but as purpose, not as possession, but as direction. When I say you are mine, I am not building a cage. I am building a promise. I am saying that out of all the noise, all the speed, all the ambition and distraction and endless movement, I have stopped and aimed my entire life toward you. I am saying I do not want to conquer you. I want to stand beside you. I am saying that I am no longer mixing up control with commitment. I am finally understanding that love is not about leading, not about winning, not about being the strongest presence in every room. Love is about staying. It is about listening carefully. It is about choosing again on the quiet days when there are no headlines, no applause, no excitement to keep us distracted. It is about remaining when nothing dramatic is happening and nothing is pulling us together except simple decision. I cannot change the past. I cannot rewrite the moments when fear spoke louder than love. I cannot undo the times when my intensity felt heavy instead of protective. But I can tell the truth now. I can say clearly that the center of everything I have ever chased was never power. It was connection. It was the hope that one person would look at me without needing me to be extraordinary and still decide to stay. So when I say you are mine now and always, I mean I have chosen you with open eyes. I mean I am not running from silence anymore. I mean I am learning to sit still in the same room and let myself be seen without turning it into a performance. I mean I am not asking you to dim your light so that I can feel brighter. I am asking to stand close to your fire and let it warm both of us without trying to shape it or control it. Mine does not mean owned. Mine means chosen. Mine means I am here. Mine means I am staying. Mine means that even if the world keeps seeing only the edges of me, I am finally speaking from the center. And the center has always been this simple and this human. I want to love and I want to be loved. Not because it strengthens an image, not because it supports a narrative, but because without it, none of the rest carries meaning. To say you are mine and truly mean that my whole future is moving toward you. That every decision I make from this moment forward carries your name somewhere inside its reason. In 2017, I sat across from a journalist and I cried. Not just tears in my eyes, but real crying. And what came out of me was not about production numbers at Tesla or launch schedules at SpaceX or the outside pressures that honestly felt like they were threatening everything I had spent 15 years building. What came out was about her, about the absence of her, about the sharp and unbearable weight of loving someone and then losing them and walking back into a house where the silence is so deep you can almost hear your own thoughts echo off the walls. I said, I cannot be happy without love. I said, going to sleep alone breaks me. I said, the house feels like a monument to what is missing. And I meant every word. I was not performing vulnerability for a magazine story. I was drained. I was exhausted from carrying a public life that looked full and powerful and a private life that felt empty. I let it out because I did not have the strength left to keep it inside. That moment cost me something. Letting people see that cost me something. But I do not regret it because it was real. And the true things are always worth the cost of saying them. About Amber Heard, I said I was deeply in love and that it hurt badly. Those words came out of me in an interview, and I meant them completely. What we had was short in time and massive in intensity. She was consuming in the way certain people are consuming. When she was in the room, nothing else mattered. When she was gone, nothing else could replace her. I was possessive. I will say that clearly because it is true. I felt things with an intensity that sometimes turned into jealousy. Sometimes it showed up as holding on too tightly. Sometimes it showed up as needing to know where she was, who she was with, and whether I was still the one she was choosing. That is not something I am proud of. That is something I now understand came from fear instead of love. Real love does not need constant watching. Real love does not demand proof every hour that it still exists. Real love trusts, and the version of me that was with her had not yet learned how to trust completely. That version of me had not yet understood the difference between loving someone and needing them so desperately that the need itself becomes pressure. Stay with me here, because this part is uncomfortable even for me to admit. I have had relationships with more than one person during the same period of time. I am not going to pretend that is simple. I am not going to act like it does not complicate the picture of a man who says he wants one lasting, devoted love. The contradiction is real. I have thought about it deeply. What I can tell you is that it did not come from not caring. It came from the opposite. It came from caring so much, from needing connection so urgently, that I sometimes reached in more than one direction at once because the fear of being completely alone was stronger than my ability to sit with that fear. That is not an excuse. It is an explanation. And those two things are different. I am not asking for approval. I am asking for understanding of the need that drove those choices. Because the need itself is real. The need for love, the need for companionship, the need for someone steady beside me. I've spent too much time pretending that need is weakness. It is not weakness. It is human. Grimes changed something inside me. She showed me a version of love that did not require either of us to shrink so the other could feel large. She had her own world. Her art, her thinking, her completely original way of seeing existence. She did not need my world to confirm hers. That independence was powerful. It was one of the most attractive things I had ever seen. Yes, I was protective, strongly protective in the same way I am intense about everything that matters to me. Our children carry that protectiveness in how they were named, in how they were raised, in the way I have fought for their stability, even when everything between their mother and me became complicated. She once described our connection as something without a proper word for it. I think that is accurate. What we were did not fit into common language. It was two people in very different orbits, choosing to share gravity for a time. And when that gravity became too complex to hold us together, it did not end neatly. Nothing real ends neatly. But what existed was real, and I hold it with respect because real things deserve respect. There is a kind of loneliness that does not get talked about enough. It is not the loneliness of being physically alone. It is the loneliness of being misunderstood, of being known for what you create rather than for who you are, of having people drawn to your ambition, your vision, your results, and realizing that none of them know the version of you that lies awake at 3 a.m, wondering if any of it matters without someone beside you. I have lived that loneliness. I still live it in the quiet spaces between everything else. In an interview in 2022, I admitted that there are times when I feel lonely. I said, my children help, my friends help, but many nights I go to sleep alone. It was a simple sentence, but it felt important because it was true. I am often alone, and I do not enjoy it. No company, no success, No achievement changes that particular reality. Here is what I have learned about the kind of love I want. Not from victories. Victories teach surface lessons. I learned this from losses, from silence, from lying awake in a large house in the middle of the night and understanding clearly what is missing. I want one person. That is the full sentence. One person who is mine and who I am theirs. One person who knows the version of me that exists before the public image assembles itself in the morning. Who knows the version of me that is uncertain, sometimes dark, sometimes difficult, sometimes quiet, and chooses to stay anyway. Not because I am impressive, not because of what I represent, not because of what I control or what I might someday build, but because of who I am when all of that is removed. Just a person, just human, still reaching for something warm in the dark. I have posted William Shakespeare about love. I have said in interviews that love is necessary for my happiness the way oxygen is necessary for breathing. I have cried publicly about loneliness, and I meant it every time. And I am telling you now, directly, without performance, in the simplest words I can use, that what I want is you. The specific you who exists somewhere in this world carrying your own history, your own scars, your own complicated feelings about being loved without conditions. I am not asking you to rescue me. I am not asking you to complete me. I am asking you to stand with me, to choose me as I choose you, to understand that when I say mine, I am not reaching to control. I am reaching to commit. I am learning. I am still imperfect. I still feel deeply and sometimes too intensely, but I am more aware now, more honest, more willing to sit in silence instead of filling it with movement. You are mine does not mean you belong to me. It means I am offering myself fully. It means I am placing my future in the direction of you. It means I am no longer afraid to say that love is not a side story in my life. It is the center. And if you choose me back, if you decide to stand in that center with me, then everything else I build, everything else I create, everything else I attempt to send into the world will finally have the one thing it has always needed to truly matter: someone to come home to.